I had a very profound near-death experience. That actually involved one of my friends, Christy, because she was there at the time when it happened. But after that near-death experience, I felt like I was supposed to share that story. I felt like I was supposed to enlighten other people, be some sort of a harbinger, if you will. But I didn't have the confidence, and I hid it, and I ran from it. And my life just systematically got worse and worse and worse because I wasn't answering what my soul was telling me to do.
So on a daily basis, I just grab this guitar, as does Christy, and we'll just play it, and it'll fill up the house with some great sound. And it's a little imprint of Rod, so kind of as every day passes, I get to think of Rod probably at least once a day.
I wanted to shoot this film because I think the case of Rod brings up the question, just how far will you go to support a friend?
I met Rod in the 90s. I was a commercial photographer, and Rod actually worked with me.
I started realizing that he was outside not by choice. As far as I felt like he wasn't outside by choice, that he had fallen to onto bad times, and
which just wasn't entertainment anymore. It wasn't making photographs and making movies. It was something more substantial and deeper than that. But I ran from it, and my life just got worse. And I spent a few years in the city of Denver. I went there for an adventure. I was walking away from everything. I said, I want to go off and just start in a city where I don't know anybody.
And he was kind and fun and interesting to be around.
He had a little bit of a meltdown, decided that he was going to live outside in Denver. He was going to walk away from everything.
I actually had a sense back then that there was something was just a little off with him.
And just forget who Rod Honeycutt used to be, because I had grown tired of that guy. And I was planning on going out and just going to Denver, and then I was going to explore all these great spiritual places on the west, and Sedona and New Mexico and all these beautiful places out there.
In our group, I've probably given up on him a couple of times through the years because I just don't, I have a hard time being around someone that just doesn't seem to care about helping themselves. It's really hard for me to see past that.
And but I got sidetracked because I had some things happen, and everything happens for a reason. And I ended up on a riverbank, homeless in Denver. And I remember that very specifically because it was the first night I've ever spent. I've been homeless. I've had no place to go a lot of times, but I have great friends, so I've always had a couch. I never had to spend a night outdoors until that night in Denver.
And of course, Jade and I were pretty upset, and we tried to talk him down, and he was having none of it. But he got into a headspace where he decided he had no other choice, or he was pressing the nuclear button and going to Denver to be homeless.
And Rod has just made his way to my house. And looking back, now I can use the word manipulated me into feeling sorry for him. And so my plan at that point was, I can be the Salvation Army for Rod.
And I was really surprised that I woke up the next morning. Because when you're homeless, that is your biggest thing. You have to wake up. But on that riverbank, I had another heart-to-heart talk with my creator, my inner soul, or whatever. And that creator told me, look, I know you ran away from that book 20 years ago, but nobody said you had to write a book about that. I just told you were going to write books. You were going to write books. And you want to write about something else? Here, I'll give you something else to write about. Stick with me and ride this thing out on this riverbank for a while, and you can write about that. Forget about writing a book about the near-death experiences, 20 years had passed by then. The whole idea of near-death experiences has gotten way more common. I mean, people just didn't talk about this back in the 90s, okay? Quite as much as they do today. So the stigma has been, kind of dissipated quite a bit. People are very more open to that. So, it was no longer a novel thing to write a book about your near-death experience. If you go to the INES website, there's like 5,000 stories of people who've had their near-death experiences. It's a very common thing. So creators said, hey, I'll give you something else to write a book about. So it's right about that time that I started realizing there were other people homeless all around me on this riverbank, and there was this complete counterculture civilization of homeless people.
And so we decided together that he was going to clean out my garage. And at the same time, I found a little work for him.
Buy a van and live in it. He can go move someplace that's cheaper and maybe more peaceful for his spirit.
With their own bartering system and their own checks and balances and their own way of doing things. And I became enthralled with that. So I literally committed myself to stay out there for 2 years in order to write about it. Why did I pick 2 years? Because arbitrarily, it seems like when you go into the military, you go for a 2-year enlistment. If you go off as a missionary for, for the Mormons or something, you go for 2 years. 2 years seems to be what it takes to grasp something. And I felt like if I went out there for a couple of weekends and just kind of hung out, I wouldn't get it. I would be fake. So I had to live it, So for 2 years, I did not sleep indoors once. For 2 years, I slept outside in a sleeping bag. If I was lucky, I had a tent. I did not even have a driver's license. There were times that I went maybe 9 months without even any change in my pocket.
I remember I actually took photographs. It was cold, and I was standing outside my garage, and I took a photograph of Rod in there with the broom, and the whole garage was just full of dust. And it was all backlit. And I thought, wow, this is a beautiful photograph, but here's Rod sweeping my garage.
And so I committed to do that. And the only 2 people that I told that I was out there, because people just knew Rod went off and took off on some sabbatical, but they didn't know what happened to me. Only 2 people, and that was Christy and Jade. And they kept up with me and helped me survive that. And if it hadn't been for them, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have made it back out. So the 2 years was up, and it was time to get me out of there. And that's when the problems really started, because I had gotten so used to outdoor living, I was like a feral cat, and I didn't have a driver's license. And they literally had to rescue me out of Denver. Someone had to come pick me up in Denver, take me up to Twin Lakes, Colorado, where I could get on a bus without an ID, and bus me back to Los Angeles.
He has some disability appointments coming up in a little less than 2 weeks. I think it's his final medical review, so hopefully he gets disability. If he does, he has all of the choices in the world. He would probably get some type of back pay.
Got him a futon, and we found this beautiful, awesome dresser on the side of the road and a coffee table. I gave him a really nice wool rug to put down on the floor. And slowly it turned into a really swanky, cool little rod pad in the garage. And
Yeah. One of the things that I really discovered about being outdoors for 2 years is a very profound thing, and that is that human beings were not meant to live inside. We were meant to be, covered and sheltered, I suppose, but not climate controlled in these boxes. And when you are outdoors in the elements, you will start to sync with nature in ways that you never imagined.
Christy and Jade and your commitment to saving Rod, whatever that is, has had me relook at how I feel about my friends, and I think you were modeling a really beautiful, unconditional love toward him.
he, 9 times out of 10, he would show up for work, and he worked hard. And
what is, I think we all have crazy friends that do dumb stuff, and there's a point where you go, I just can't have you as a friend anymore, man. You're like too much. And Rod seems to be a classic example of somebody who would test that.
And then he would come home and go in the garage, and I just decided that I was going to leave him alone, help him where I thought I could help him, but then give him the space to heal and to do things on his own terms. But I think in the back of my mind, I thought, okay, well, this can't go on forever.
I was never a super outdoorsy type. I've always loved animals, but I was never the camping kind of guy. When I camped in an Airstream. I'm like, what's the Wi-Fi password and where's the honor bar? That was my idea of glamping. But when you live outdoors and you live outdoors constantly and you're aware of everything that goes on, you become cyclical with nature, and you become cyclical with the seasons. And Denver was a place that had 4 distinct seasons, much like we have here in the South. So, but I learned that humans really weren't supposed to be so insular, and you do acclimate. Like, I have a different sense of acclimation to temperature now. 50 degrees for me is comfortable. Most people are like shivering at 50, but I'll be out in a t-shirt and it's 50 now. Things that I never knew. The other thing is you will realize, there are things about yourself you don't know that you can do. It's kind of like a boot camp. It's kind of like getting kicked out of an airplane with a parachute and a map, and that's it. And you got to make your way. But you will surprise yourself at what you know how to do that you didn't know you could do.
Rod, when you talk to Rod, he just seemed so positive and so clear-headed and had all these ideas. So I wanted to support him. So I would throw him $20 here or there. I'm really stuck. I really need a little bit, and my phone bill's coming up. Can you help me?
So after a year and a half, I decided to give him a move-out warning.
Like, I could be having a conversation with somebody on the phone, Christy maybe or something, and we're talking about trying to get me out. We're having a very, very important conversation, and it's late in the afternoon. Once the sun hit a certain level in the sky in the afternoon, I automatically could not concentrate on anything else other than collecting firewood. Like, I would be like, I just got to go. You will learn to take care of yourself, you know what I'm saying? But the thing about being outdoors and you don't have a job or a career or anything like that, you only have 2 things to deal with outdoors. And that's, number 1, to take care of yourself and be safe from predators. Feed yourself. And after that, life is pretty easy. You know what I'm saying? There's no stress, no car payments, no insurance. I used to sit on the side of that riverbank and watch thousands of cars go by on the road, all these nice new SUVs and stuff, and I'm going, there's 60,000, 40,000, 70,000, 60,000, just hundreds of them driving by. And you can just pick up on the energy of those people driving those cars. If they're just, I gotta fucking go work to pay for this thing. The lifestyle of being outdoors is a much better way of life.
And one thing I told him was that I wasn't going to kick him out on the street. I wasn't going to just tell him, the day before that he needed to leave, that I would give him 6 months notice.
There is, there's a close connection that we've all had over the years. Of course, I've known Rod for a very, very long time. Rod, Jade, some of our core group, and we see something beautiful in Rod. He is a special person. He has a beautiful heart.
And that would give him plenty of time to make, a plan B for himself. But he decided that he was just going to ignore the 6-month notice.
And once I got back to civilization, I realized that I've gotten some pretty bad PTSD and from the things that I saw out there. And so I've been struggling ever since then to get my life back to normal, to go back to work, to go back whatever. But my life purpose now is about these 2 books that I have to write. One about my near-death experience and one about the homeless thing. Because what I saw out there was pretty disturbing. And what it is it's what I saw, how people treat homeless people when nobody else is watching.
No, I don't know for him to find some kind of healing. I've always believed that he really needed to go to what would be his bottom, and I think I assume he's been there a few times, but it just gets into the, can he survive that? Would he just commit suicide? Does he want to live?
I think he's got a lot of trauma that he's processing. So he doesn't maybe have the tools that he really needs to function, which is why he needs the disability in the first place.
I've always been happy to listen to his stories of the rock and roll Sunset Strip kind of interactions with the Motley Crues of the world and whatnot. Those were the artists that I kind of liked growing up, and he seemed to have so many run-ins with them, whether he was mixing them or producing or whatever it was, or playing guitar for some of them and in the studio. And so I think, he was all too willing to share some of those stories with me, which I really appreciated because I ate it up. And so I always really think fondly of him. He's certainly a talented musician, and I think he's really lucky to have a really supportive group of friends that really care about him. And I think that group, or this group of friends, is really lucky to have him. He's a gentle heart and a very talented guy. So I always just wish him the best when I think of him.
And so it was getting closer and closer to the end of that 6-month notice. And so I started reminding him, what's going on? What's going on with your disability? Have you thought about where you're going to live? And he would get so stressed out.
Rod would do anything for anyone. He just has trouble functioning within the constructs of society.
And he didn't want to talk about it. And then as it started getting closer, we started getting into fights about it. And he, almost jumped out of my car one day because we were fighting.
So at the time I was able to send him $10, $20 here and there, not much, but it was several years this happened. And I also would talk to Christy, and we would, try to make a plan for him sometimes to help him out and give him advice or throw him a little bit of money. And then it got really bad because he was almost freezing to death, and all these different situations had happened for him outside. And what was going through my mind, and this is how I really feel, that if it were me, I know he would not let me live outside and freeze to death.
But I came home from my Christmas break, and he said he wanted to talk. And basically he told me that he was tired of everyone telling him what to do, and that he was taking things into his own hands. And I said, great, that's great. And that he was not going to leave my garage until he got himself a car.
I think Rod needs some sort of guidance with regard to budgeting, basic running of a house. I don't know where he is in terms of, being able to just make sure doors are locked and gas flames are turned off. I imagine he can take care of those basic things, but I think he gets distracted.
And then, I don't know what happened, a switch went off in my head, and I freaked out. And it was almost like I had this out-of-body experience. I said to him, you are leaving, and you're leaving today, because I've given you 6 months notice, and you've gone a week past your 6 months notice. And no, you are not staying here until you get a car.
Because we had always had a really close friendship, and he was part of the tribe. He's in my soul family, and I wouldn't want anybody in my soul family to freeze to death or live outside, and I don't think anyone would let that happen to me.
And he went inside, and I was on the phone with the police, and I was explaining to them the situation, and all of a sudden my phone died. And so I think the police must have thought, oh my God, he's gotten her, he attacked her. And so 10 minutes later, like 6 or 8 police cars show up. It was a lot.
And that's just part of what I feel inside for him. That's part of what drives me to help him. And because he's family. And I don't know if it's, he's not family per se in this lifetime, but I think we go way back. Christy, Jim, all of us, we are soul connected, or we wouldn't still be hanging on like this with each other.
You are leaving today. And he was like, no, I'm not. And I said, fine, I'm calling the cops. And it was fast. And so they showed up, and Rod stood outside my garage door with his chest all puffed out, like King Kong. And he was like, bring it on. And it was like this other personality took over. And I knew that he knew his rights at that point. And he was probably thinking the whole time, you can tell me to leave, but I know I'm legally a tenant now and you can't kick me out.
I just feel like it's a solid connection. So I always tell myself that. I always know that he would never leave me outside. He would do anything for me. And I just always felt like I could do something for him to help. So Christy and I decided to try to help him get out of this situation. And it took a lot of effort. I've spent countless hours doing research, trying to find him places to live that are cheap, trying to find him rides home, or I even had people that live in Denver that I tried to bring him things, and any connection I had that could help Rod, we tried to help him, and we knew he had maybe some PTSD or something like that from being outside, so we all, or she and I would try to figure out the best way to help him without giving him everything. So we wanted him ultimately to help himself.
It certainly feels good to know that you have a team and people who love you unconditionally enough to do that. Because, I don't have much of a family, and my family was very, I had a very bad childhood. And my family was scattered. My mother died very early when I was like 18. My father and I were estranged. So when I came to Charlotte in '95,
and they talked to Rod, and and they talked to me, and then they reconvened, and basically they were like, look, here's the deal. In North Carolina, if somebody lives in your space for more than 2 weeks and gets mail and contributes to the household, they are considered a tenant. And he was like, here's some paperwork. You're going to have to file an eviction. And I was like, are you kidding me? Oh my God. And so I was like yelling at Rod across my driveway. And I'm like, seriously, Rod? This is how you treat me?
So he would do a little bit, and he would do just enough to make us feel like, oh, he's so close, we can't give up. He's done well. So then we would give him a little bit more. And then all shit would hit the fan, and he'd fall back again, and then he'd dig himself out, and he knew just what to say or whatever, and we would keep helping him, and then we finally got him out of Denver.
After everything I've done for you for 2 years, this is how you treat me? And he was like, oh yeah, and and I'm going to get a lawyer, and oh, you know who that lawyer is too. So yes, so you just wait for that. I'm going to get a lawyer and sue you. And I'm like, oh, wow. This is unbelievable. I'm like, who are you? So now I'm thinking, yeah, maybe he does have multiple personality disorder. Like, who does that?
It just went from there. And there's been so many episodes and so many situations that I'm like, how can he mess up every single situation that he lives in? There's got to be something to this.
He asked for the police officer's business card before they left. And he was like all buddy-buddy with the police officer. And so I turned off the power, and he immediately got that guy's business card out and called him and said, Diane's harassing me. She turned off my power to the garage. So 10 minutes later, they show back up, and I'm outside at my power box, and they came back and said, did you turn off the power? And I was like, yes, I did. And they were like, well, actually, they probably should have said, legally, you're not allowed to do that because he's considered a tenant. But instead, they said, look, you're just going to piss him off, and if you really want him to leave, just turn the power back on, and I'm going to go back and have a conversation with him and say, look, you really need to start packing your bags because she's filing an eviction notice and you're going to have to leave eventually. So why don't you just start packing your bags now?
Because he's never wrong. If you talk to Rod, he's never wrong. It's never his fault. Absolutely never his fault. But yet he can never work out any situation. So that leaves us very frustrated.
And the next day, I'm still mad. And I'm like, what? Okay, so what can I do now legally? So I'm like, well, Wi-Fi is not technically, something that he has to have as a tenant. So I changed my Wi-Fi password. And cutting off Rod's Wi-Fi is like cutting off his hand. He cannot live without his Wi-Fi.
But there's something still there that gives us, hope. And we hope that he will get better and find a situation where he can relax and continue his path. But sometimes I feel like maybe we've enabled him. But it's hard to give up on your family. It's hard to give up on your soul family.
Before that, I was working with Jade and Christy. We were like creating a care team for Rod because I had gotten some advice from a therapist, and he said that it's not fair that you have to be his landlord and his boss and his friend, and now, you have to evict him. He said you need a team of people to help you.
Well, what was it like? I guess as far as how all this experience and all this affects my self-esteem, I've always had issues with my self-esteem. I've always had, confidence issues. And so that's why it was so important for me to have all those important people on my resume in my career early on, I validated myself based on who I worked with and what I accomplished. You take all these things away, you got to find something else to validate yourself with, So it's tough for me because of my PTSD, I have issues with stress and things like that, and I literally just take off walking when something overwhelms me. I've done that before. I'd be in a store and get overwhelmed at the checkout counter and just walk out of the store, and the next thing I know, I've walked 9 miles before I realize where I'm at sometimes. So I don't function as right, you know what I'm saying? Therapy and things are helping, But I had to be very careful. I was very, very careful about speaking about the homeless thing because I kind of brought it on myself. I decided to go out there and spend that time out there and to go through that. And I didn't realize it was going to mess me up so bad as a person. But I was always very careful about saying the way I explained that I went out there to do this homeless thing because people see, that's what I'm saying, people in this country see being homeless as a failure.
And so I asked Jade and Christy to be on that care team. And so Jade was really good and helpful, and, she was very resourceful. So she found, the great place for him, a great place to move to. But, and maybe this is definitely not something I'm very proud of, but I stood outside the garage door and I just let him have it. I just told him how I couldn't believe what he was doing. I couldn't believe how he was treating me after everything I had done for him. And Rod cries easily. And so I was like, oh, what are you going to do? Cry? Oh, poor Rod. And then I brought up something that you had said. I said, Jim McGuire said that you're unhelpable. You're unhelpable.
And met all of these lovely people. They became my family. And to have them still 30 years later, still in my life, still helping me, and because they believe in what I'm about, I suppose. They want to see me do well. They want to see me bring this message out because it's the most important thing to me. I don't even live my life for me anymore. It's really about what I want to do to help enlighten other people.
So life after Rod, take 6. So it's been, how long has it been since he left? He left in January, February, March, April, May. Wow, 5 months, almost 5 months So almost 5 months later. The nice thing is that I don't think about him every single day, which I used to. I don't obsess about, well, maybe if I just got him, a cheap apartment, or maybe if I just found this great car for him, or maybe I just found a van, or maybe a live work situation. I was still obsessing about how I could help him.
That's my struggle with Rod. I just feel like he may not have the capacity to, everybody else is trying to save him, but can Rod save Rod? This is the big question to me.
I have been studying about the fourth dimension, and it's my understanding that we live in the third dimension, and that the fourth dimension is time and emotion. And if you can sit quietly and close your eyes, you can bring yourself there with your thoughts and your feelings, and you can create a whole scenario. And if you can actually see it in your mind and feel it in your body, that eventually it will come to fruition. And so I was trying to share that with Rod by trying to create a mental picture for him of how the ending of my garage was going to go. And I talked to him about us trying to imagine him packing up a van and moving out and bringing all of his stuff, not abandoning his stuff, which he usually had to do, but he was actually allowed to bring all of his stuff with him this time.
Because I've seen some crazy fucking shit. Excuse my French, but I've seen some crazy stuff out there. And, it was that Jesus guy that said, you can always judge a civilization by how it treats the least among them. And I really, for the first time in my life, really understood what it is like to understand homelessness. Now, I've lived in big cities my whole life. I've lived in Los Angeles. I've lived in Miami, and so I would see homeless people all the time. The ones that come up and try to wash your windshield, and the ones that want to catch you at the gas station when you can't get in your car, and they want to ask you for money. And those things always bugged me. Not anymore, because now I see a different way of thinking. And not everybody out there is a drug addict. They don't start out that way. Okay, a lot of them turn into drug addicts because that's the only thing they can do. But that's what my life is about now, is to spread awareness about the homeless thing, push the spiritual side of things to let everybody know that life is not such a bad thing. And when we die, we don't die. We just go do something else.
And part of that happened, but the apartment part didn't happen. But I'm still going to continue to imagine that for Rod. And hopefully that will become a reality. That he gets his disability, that he finds an affordable place to live, that he's in a community supported by friends and new friends, and that he finds hope and happiness and joy and can live a normal life.
My name is Rod Honeycutt.